Extravagance. It is a lack of restraint in spending money or use of resources. That is the definition of extravagance. Lack of restraint in spending money or use of resources. Tuck that away. Hold on to that. We'll visit it later. Guys, we're in the Gospel of John today. I'm excited to be with you here today. Welcome if you're online. We're so glad you're joining us today. We're in the Gospel of John. We're buttoning up the end of chapter 11 and we're moving into chapter 12. So if you would like to turn there or scroll there or however you do it. If somebody has a scroll, that would be epic, but I meant on your phone. Our church would go up a few notches if somebody brought in a scroll. But John chapter 11, starting in verse 53. I want to show you, we're going to be studying John 12, 1 through 8. But there's a thing right in front of it and a thing right behind it that has to give us the context of what's stuck in the middle there because the author, John, was very deliberate with what he put in here. Look with me in verse 53 of John chapter 11. It says, "So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death." Who made plans? The Pharisees, the religious leaders. Put who to death? Jesus. Verse 54, "Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with his disciples." Now look down with me in chapter 12, verse 9. "When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus." The religious organization of the Jews seemed to be quite violent in the day. We're going to kill Jesus. Well, let's tie on Lazarus. We've got to kill him too. This is a rough bit. And so it's an interesting bookend sort of deal. That's right before the story we're going to look at, and it's right after the story we're going to look at. The religious leaders want to kill everyone that is opposing them. Right now it's Jesus, it's Lazarus. Maybe the disciples are going to get thrown into that boat sometime soon. But that's the context, and that's very interesting to me because what we're going to read is just complete opposite. You have this like, Jesus can't walk around publicly. He's going to get killed. Lazarus raised from the dead. They're trying to put him back in the tomb. He's like, no thanks. So we have this interesting contrast. And then we have chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. And it's just so different from everybody's trying to kill him. Listen to this. Verse 1, chapter 12. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." So at the beginning of this, we have everybody wants to kill him. At the end of this, people want to kill him. And in the middle, somebody wants to worship him. Like what a dichotomy, what an interesting structure. So let's look at this in its historical context and understand what all the symbols mean. And then what does it mean for us? So Jesus has come back to hang out with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, right? And it's right when the Passover is happening, which was one of the 3 Jewish festivals, which was a pilgrimage. You're supposed to show up to that. And historically, they believe Jerusalem would go from about 100,000 to a little over 1 million during Passover in this time. So yeah, 1 million people in one place. That's pretty intense, especially when most of them ride horses or donkeys. It's going to be quite the deal. So Jesus is back. says he's reclining at table with Lazarus. If you know anything about Mary and Martha from the other Gospels, you know one likes to serve and one likes to just sit and hang with Jesus. And the same thing's happening here. It says Martha's serving, Mary's not. So they have that interesting thing, which is from a different Gospel. But can you imagine the questions when Lazarus is hanging out there, the people that are like, when's the best-selling book coming out, bud? Come on, I know you died. You were dead for 4 days. Like, you got to tell us what's it like on the other side, man. Did you pay the boatman? Like, what does it look like over there? Like, did you see a light when it was happening? Like, how did this go down? I can't imagine the conversation, or was everybody just like, don't say anything. Jesus is here. He'll think we're weird. Because right? I mean, they had to have been interested back then too, right? Like, this dude was dead for 4 days. Now he's alive. Like, were you conscious? Like, what was it like in there, over there, however you want to say it? That must have been a very interesting table conversation. Now, when it comes to what Mary did in verse 3, when she took a pound of expensive ointment made of pure nard. Why was it expensive? Well, because it came from India. They had to import it in, so that made it very, very expensive. So that mattered a lot. But context of what's happening that makes something that's like impactful for us. It says she anointed his feet. That didn't happen in those days. That didn't happen ever. There's no biblical like feet were anointed. Heads were anointed. Anointed his head with oil. And that was always the thing. Old Testament, New Testament, that's how you anoint. So what? She anointed his feet. That stood out to everybody then. It should stand out to us now because that's super outside of the norm. Well, the feet were the worst, right? We've talked about that here before. The lowest servant possible, non-Jew, was supposed to wash the feet of the guests that walked in because that was too high of a job for a Jew. If it was a servant, it had to be a non-Jew that washed people's feet. And she just took this really expensive thing and anointed his feet. Mary took the world's greatest riches and put them in the lowest place. So what did she just teach us? True value versus perceived value. Perceived value, that is worth a ton of money. What are you doing? True value, this is Jesus. What a dichotomy to look at. She took the world's greatest riches and put them in the lowest place. Everybody noticed that was there, and that can't be lost on us. The move she made, I'm going to have something that's worth the most in this house, in this room, maybe more than anybody else here, and I'm going to pour it on his feet to show the value of Jesus. What a move. What a heart. That was just, to me, as I'm studying that, like, what a beautiful picture of true value versus perceived value. And now I don't have to guilt you into something like where are we in life? We have perceived value instead of true value. Right, that's you deal with that in your own heart, in your own head. Because that's, wow. That's powerful. And she took the world's greatest riches and put them at the feet of Jesus. That's impactful. She wiped his feet with her hair. Culturally, again, that meant a ton to them, and to us, we're like, okay, cool, all right, you wash it out later, whatever, and smell good for a while, I'm sure. Right? It was totally inappropriate for a woman to let her hair down. That was a sign of loose morals in that time. And it was super outside of the ordinary to definitely touch your face or head or hair to anybody's feet. Like, this was the most placing myself in the lowest position possible move for her. And it was just a show of her humility, her reverence, her gratitude. Jesus had just raised her brother from the dead, which probably saved their family, since it looks like he was caring for his two sisters who was still living in the same house. And what it said to me was nothing was going to stop Mary from showing her love and devotion and gratitude to Jesus. Nothing was going to get in the way of that. And again, I love Mary. It's like, wow, the world's greatest riches put on the feet of Jesus. No social norm, no rules for living. Nothing's getting in my way. No embarrassment from the people watching. She just undid her hair in front of a group of dudes. Like that was whoa. No, I'll do whatever I can to show Jesus I care. I love him. He is my Savior. So Mary is putting on symbolically this crazy display of faith. That we miss it because we've all read this. Most of us, not we all, a lot of us have heard this story, read this story. Like, oh yeah, she anointed his feet with expensive stuff and cleaned it with her hair. Like, no, I don't think you understand the significance and the impact of what she's doing here. That would have been preaching the gospel to everybody in that room, all the other people that were not making displays like that for Jesus. I love that it says in verse 3 at the end of it, it says, and the fragrance filled the whole house. It's filled with it. It's very expensive. It's something very aromatic. And when we're looking at symbolism and what did all of these things mean, when you love and serve Jesus humbly like that, the fragrance of that will fill any space that you are in. Of course, there's a real deal where everybody did smell it. And there's the symbolic, like that fragrance fills the room no matter who you are and where you are when you can humbly, submissively serve and love Jesus in that way, in that extreme, extravagant way. Mary's story is powerful, especially when I get to the next verses 4-6 and I hear Judas talk and he sounds like me. What are you doing? Don't waste that. I mean, we could do so much good with that. Why? We could do so much good with that. It was worth so much money. Like, think about all the different things we could have done. Think about all the people we could have helped. Right? And it sounds like me. Sounds like some of us, right? Because we're very practical, and it sounds reasonable, right? It's like, well, yeah, that's something. Had I been in the room, I might have said the exact. He just poured it out. It's all gone now. That was equivalent modern day. It was worth $40,000 or $50,000. It was a laborer's year's wages. Yeah, it was like what? That lasted 5 minutes. We could have made eternal impact with that. Yeah. And so that's another reason Mary's story helps me so much, because in the story I know I sound like Judas in my head and my heart a lot. And that's not the team you want to be on if you remember how this story goes towards the end. That isn't, you don't want to be Team Judas. It's a bad team. You want to be Team Mary on this. I also found it funny that virtue signaling is a new term, but an old trick. He said, oh, he could have given it to the poor. It's like, but we know he wasn't doing that. He was just going to steal the money later. I was like, that. So Judas doing the virtue signaling. But here's something, so if we're looking at Mary and Judas and the two different hearts and the two different conditions and what they were working towards, Mary was taking the world's greatest riches and placing them at the feet of Jesus. Judas was using Jesus for his own personal gain. Everybody's looking at Jesus. One's coming from this direction and one's coming from this direction. Right? Same Jesus in the middle. And again, I want to look to my heart and to our church and to the people I know and love. Man, are we Team Mary or Team Judas? Do we use Jesus because he's going to give us things and help us out and it's going to make everything, like my stuff gets better? Or are we like Mary and we worship Jesus because he is better? Like that's what, I mean, I read this story and I just see so much of me in my heart and how I'm torn so often. Like, man, I want to be Team Mary, but I know my natural inclinations are Team Jesus. Team Judas. And what's interesting when I look at what Judas said, hey, why would you waste it like that? We could have spent it on and it was this extravagant gift, right? Y'all remember the definition of extravagance? It's like a complete disregard for how money and resources are spent. In verses 7 and 8, Jesus accepted and defended Mary's extravagant gift. He was not with the pragmatist, which we know he was virtue signaling and really he wasn't that practical. But he wasn't with the one that was trying to calm down the excitement for Jesus. He wasn't with the one that was trying to say, I mean, yeah, Jesus is great, but look at all these other. he was with the one that was all sold out devotion. All in, whatever I can put in. It's interesting when you read the commentaries and you study about this, that family must have been wealthy, and most likely that was an heirloom or something that was passed down because that was security to their family. They had a year's worth of wages just hanging out in a jar in the house. To them, that was security. That was retirement. And Jesus defended that gift. I know there's been a place and time in my life where, I'll say it like this. I won't use myself as an example. I have a buddy, a kid that came through my youth group that I mentored for a while, and as he's gone on, and he's now youth pastor, they keep talking to him. But when he was dating this girl, asked for her hand in marriage, and Dad's like, well, how are you going to provide for her? He's like, well, I've been called into ministry. I'm going to be youth pastor, that's where. And Dad's like, cool, yeah, what's plan B if that doesn't work? There is no plan B. I've been called into this. This is what God's asked me to do. I'm sorry. It's all I got. And his dad was very concerned for his daughter because God was the only plan and there was no plan B. So I get it. As dad, I'm a father, I'm a daughter. I get it. It's like, okay. But that's where Mary was at. And Jesus defended that position. So I know some of us can be all in, pretty zealous, pretty well, and everybody's like, well, calm down, pace yourself, it's a marathon. It's like, yeah, I don't know if that's appropriate. I know the church has done that to a lot of people that got really on fire and fired up for the Lord and wanted to serve and do the things and like be all in and give the money and all the stuff, and the church is like, pump the brakes, bud, it's okay, join the rest of us that are just kind of going, I love how Jesus defended it. He's like, no, this is good. In the other gospel that shares the same story, he said, this act that she's done will be shared every time the gospel is shared. From now until forever. And here it is, and we're reading it and studying it. Now, when we look at these two characters, we want to challenge ourselves. Remember, Team Mary, Team Judas. I know our hearts can take us one way, but we want to go the other way. Mary took the thing that was most valuable, according to the world standard, and sacrificed it like it was nothing because of her overwhelming love for Jesus. Mary properly understood true value. Judas used Jesus and his ministry for personal gain while also having the audacity to call into question the extravagant generosity of a woman just trying to love Jesus. Judas did not understand true value. So here's a comment I heard recently, I believe on a podcast, and I've been wrestling with it, trying to make sense of it a lot. And in so many words, the question that was posed was, or the statement that was made, the things that the world pushes us towards to go get, the things we want to be known for, the things that we get pats on the back for, congratulated for, that we pursue really hard, that we work really hard for, generally speaking, we don't want any of those mentioned in our eulogy. Which is a crazy concept. The things we normally pursue the hardest and work the most for are not the things we actually want to be known for when we're gone, which is concerning to say the least. Right? Like, man, Carl just climbed the corporate ladder, didn't let anything get in his way. Is not what you want the grandkids saying at your funeral, right? It's like Lucy just had all the nicest things, always just super good stuff, super expensive. That's not probably how you want to be spoken of in the end, right? I can give tons of examples for whatever it was, and the world always said, hey, make sure you take care of you first. And this is a common thing to say. I've heard relatives and friends tell children and spouses, no, if it doesn't make you happy, don't do it. Make sure you take care of you. Make sure you're happy. Who has ever said this should be at my eulogy? They always made sure they were taken care of. Right? And then the crowd's like, What are we at? Are we at a funeral? Like, that doesn't sound very becoming. Correct. And that's what challenges me in this story, because Mary was going to live, not to quote country music, but live like she was dying. Like the things she wanted to be known for, right? I don't even know who's saying it, whatever. But I know it's a song. And so that matters to me, because like we're trying to leave the right legacy, and Mary's killing it over here. And Jake and John and I had the amazing privilege about a week and a half ago to hang out with a Ugandan pastor worship leader. Scott Lambie, Rescue One More, him and his wife and daughter shared with us a few months ago. He brought over this guy named Wilson. We're like, great, Wilson. Great to meet you, Wilson. I think he's 1 year older than me. And Scott's like, hey, tell him your story. Like, tell us your story, Wilson. It's great. We don't know who Wilson is. We're like, he's a famous Ugandan worship pastor. I'm like, okay, is that a thing? Famous Ugandan worship pastors? Apparently it is. He's very famous, turns out. And he tells us this story. He's like, yeah, my parents died when I was 10. I become a street kid. I just steal stuff or beg. I lose all hope, so I go running into traffic trying to kill myself. Guy picks me up, tells me I shouldn't do that, and takes me to church. At church, they put him on the stage and say, tell everybody your story. He tells the story, and then the pastor says, who's taking him home? Like, who is taking him home and putting him back in school? Who's doing that? He said he stood there for minutes. And he's like, oh, I hated it. I wanted to run. I was like, I felt so undeserving, unworthy. Eventually, the guy's like, I got him. So this guy puts him back in the school and pays for it. For 6 years, he's in school. And eventually, he meets Jesus. He starts a Bible study with 9 people also in this school. All of a sudden, it starts growing. People start calling him pastor. He's like, he has a church of 5,000 now. He has a YouTube, one of his worship songs with over 1 million views. Like, and the thing is, he said, the school he went to this man was paying for it. When this man died, what he found out was almost half the school was paid for by that man, who would just keep taking street kids and paying for them to go, because he wanted to use all his money on that before he went. The school almost had to shut down when that man died, because he was funding like half the students. That's what he wanted to do. Wilson's story is awesome. That guy's story is just as awesome. And Wilson's story doesn't exist without that guy. I don't even know that guy's name, but I want to be like that guy. I want to be that guy. And so it reminded me that he understood true value, not perceived value. And he understood extravagance in the correct way, in the way that Jesus will defend, not condemn. Because that's powerful to me. If I'm going to go big on something, if I'm going to be all in on something, if I'm going to sell out, do it way too seriously, make people uncomfortable, I want to do it in the direction that Jesus defends me on, has my back on, say, no, that's good. That's right. That is how it should be done. I want to be more like Mary. So we finish with questions. Where is your extravagance? I'm not saying, do you have any? I'm saying, where is it? And is it pointing you, your own heart, and others towards Jesus? Or is it pointing you and others and your own heart towards you? We saw the 2 teams. One Jesus in the middle. One trying to serve him and one trying to be served by him. We don't have to beat ourselves with this question, because the Lord has grace for all things and an answer for all things, and his Holy Spirit can change us and motivate us and move us, and everything can be made right. But it is good to face this. That's why it's written in here. Challenge yourself with the words of Scripture. Let's pray.